welcome to BizTalk number 2. Hello, 大家好，欢迎来到中商社第2期 BizTalk. My name is Nofer Qin. I'm currently the 4th-year student studying finance and psychology at Sauder. I'm also the Chinese marketing VP at BizChina. So thank you all for your support for our brand new series BizTalk. In today's episode, we are gonna bring in a topic which has been broadly discussed across industry in recent years. The topic that we are gonna discuss today is ESG, environment, society, and governance. We are also very welcome to have Christie Stephenson, who is the Executive Director at Dhillon Centre for Business Ethics at UBC Sauder. She is also one of the best mentors that I have ever met during my 4-year at Sauder. So let's all welcome Christie, and before we jump into questions, Christie, can you offer us a little bit self-intro to our audiences?
Thank you so much. My name is Christie Stephenson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Dhillon Centre for Business Ethics at UBC Sauder. And I've had the pleasure of working with Novar and the rest of the team at UBC BizChina this year. So thanks so much for having me.
Great. So here comes our first question, is that I know ESG has been recently such a hot topic across industries. Many people are talking about ESG, but I guess as students, when we first heard of this concept, we get a little bit confused about what this term means. Can you give us a little bit, just a brief intro what ESG is?
Yeah, and I think people that are new to it, it's not a surprise that they can be a bit confused because there's a lot of information out there and a lot of information that's complementary, but also things around ESG get framed pretty differently sometimes. So I would say the way I would describe it in just really simple terms is I would say that E is really universally understood to be environment. One of the big issues in there that people are concerned about and discussing and working on is climate change, but it's not the only E topic. S would traditionally be social, and that's really societal issues that might be around diversity, equity, labor, all kinds of issues really related to people. The G is governance, which really is about how corporations are run, how what their board of directors are like. And interestingly, in Canada, and it's starting to spread a little bit in the world, we also have started talking in the last few years about the I in ESG. If it wasn't confusing enough already, we've added another letter, and that stands to Indigenous. And that's really Indigenous rights, reconciliation, and relationships between companies and business leaders and Indigenous nations.
Thank you, Christie. I think that is clear enough definitions. So I guess the next question is relating to your own career path. I guess 20 years, 30 years before, not a lot of people are actually talking about ESG. How has started your career in this field, and what is the thing that motivated you to kind of pursue your career in ESG for such a long time?
So interestingly, honestly, I would say it goes back to my undergraduate degree. I really wanted to do something one day where I felt like I was making a contribution to the world that was positive, that was around social change. I was worried about the environment, but I would say it was more about social issues for me. And I really didn't know like where that would lead. And to be honest, I didn't really know what kind of careers were out there. So I went to graduate school and I studied policy, and I thought that I would end up in government one day. And then when I graduated, I did work in government. I worked in politics, and I also worked in the NGO sector, in a nonprofit organization. And I really didn't feel like those were the places for me that I felt were very impactful, even though in theory they were the places for social change. And then really kind of unexpectedly, I heard about very, very early days in Canada about investors that were incorporating what we now call ESG and these social and environmental concerns into the investment process. And for me, it just resonated, and I've been connected with that field now for more than 20 years.
Our next question is more about the trends in ESG. As more and more people are working or contributing in this field, hoping to make an impact in business with incorporating ESG with their business models, what are some of the trends that you have noticed in recent years that has been helping us building a better business world?
I mean, I would say the first trend is really the big one, and that is just the growth of interest, exactly as you said. When we look back 20 or 30 years, it really wasn't an area people were talking about how business could be responsible, could look inward and see, what problems it didn't want to create, what problems it might want to help solve, and how it could really have positive impacts. People were talking about social change or environmental stewardship. They really weren't talking typically about business, but things really have changed. So it's just been the first trend is just the absolute increase in attention. Society has such clear expectations that business needs to be a positive force. And I think the business community is, it's challenging and they don't always know how to execute that. But I think that there's a lot of interest in trying to be on the right side, of problems and not on the wrong side of them.
Okay, great. I want to ask a question on behalf of our audiences who are mostly undergrad or in their masters. For people who are interested in this field, but as a student, we kind of don't have much experiences because it's still a new discussion around. What are some recommendations that you would suggest for students to take their first steps, either from the course perspective or extracurricular activities in Sauder or any outside opportunity that they might can explore?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's increasingly more opportunities. So you mentioned courses. I know certainly at Sauder there are a lot of courses, and I think we're always looking to bring new courses in so that students can learn to integrate these kind of considerations into classes. So there's more content that's spread around the courses in general. And then there's more specialized courses where the focus is really on these topics. So for example, social investing, impact investing, where you really look from the investment perspective at how you can incorporate social and environmental issues. But we have this across Sauder. The next thing is extracurricular. Of course, I know the activities of the Dhillon Centre, but again, Sauder offers lots of opportunities for students to be involved in clubs, to be involved in case competitions that are really focused on ethics and social responsibility. The resources like the Dhillon Centre are really there to support students who want to get more engaged. And so we're always open to ideas. We're always willing to support, step in, provide assistance where we can to activities that students have around these topics, and to partner with them if that's helpful. So I think there's a lot happening, but always more to come. And then in terms of outside of the school, I think there's lots of opportunities for young professionals to take what they've learned at the school and really try and integrate it into their job, whether they're actually going out and getting a job specifically with a focus on ESG, or they're just getting a job that doesn't really appear to have anything with an element of ESG, but they bring a lens of how they might be able to integrate those concerns into their work. And a lot of employers are looking to new employees to figure out that, because a lot of people have been around in the business community for a long time, haven't necessarily got this all solved. So it's a great lens that new employees can bring really to any kind of job. And keeping connected to a professional network, I think, of alumni and others can be really also helpful in that journey.
Right. I think approximately last year at this time, I was involved in the CFA Ethics Challenge with you. And it was amazing that 1 year after, I'm working with you and kind of do all of those ESG research or kind of touch a little bit on the field that you are specialized in. So yeah, I think if student has opportunity, definitely explore in any opportunity in Sauder. And I guess that also wellly transitions to our next questions. It's actually not from us. It's a question from our guest speaker for our last episode, who is our new Sauder Dean, Darren Dell. He has a question as a Dean of a business school. So as Sauder is a world-leading business school, if Sauder want to contribute something in the field of ESG, what would you say is the number one thing that the school should focus on?
Wow. So there's so many things the school could do, so many opportunities. But I would say the number one for me would be when we look at the contribution that Sauder can make to the world and all kinds of problems, and all kinds of opportunities around ESG. I do think that the number one thing we could do, because we can't do everything, is that we could really ensure that we do right by where we are. And where we are is really an interesting place. The physical geography, we find ourselves in at Sauder, and the business community, which we're in the midst of, is really British Columbia's economy. And almost the entire landmass of British Columbia is on territory that, according to our laws, was never ceded by Indigenous people. It's a pretty profound situation, and I think that that's something that we, as business leaders within Sauder, really need to get right and think thoughtfully about what that means for the future of business here and how we might be able to model, the right path here to other places in the world, because there are Indigenous people, in different places in the world that could also, use guidance on how to really forge the right path ahead when you have a history which is maybe not, the one we would wish we had.
Yeah, I think I heard the land acknowledgement when I first come to UBC, and almost all of my courses, the first class, the first thing that we talk about is to acknowledge the land to the Indigenous community in BC, in places that we live on. And I also think that's why Canada adds that I into the ESG categories.
And maybe I could say, because we didn't start out by saying that, and it's interesting because I think that there's a lot of ways that we've traditionally done things, and that's a perfect example of how we're pivoting and we're trying to make sure that we change our ways, and we're all learning all the time. And so obviously we here are on the Coast Salish people's traditional territories and unceded land, and so it's kind of, UBC Sauder just had a big conference and had global people from all over the world talking about responsible business, and the feedback I got from a lot of them was, wow, this land acknowledgement, this is really something new for us. So
yeah, and it's also new and also important in the long term for the relationship building. Mm-hmm. So coming to the end of this BizTalk, we wanted you to leave one more questions for our next speaker, just like what our previous speaker did today. So our next speaker coming for episode 3 is going to have a tech background, and it was specialized in blockchain, which is also a trendy topic nowadays in business. So what will be a question that you come up with that can be not just business related, but can also be fun or creative?
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question which is probably pretty predictable, given that I'm the director of an ethics center. And I would say that, ethics is really something that as business leaders, people need to examine, in kind of everything they do. Because sometimes you think, oh, this area of business, that doesn't really have a lot of ethical implications. But when you really start to look closely, often there are. And so I would say, and it's certainly not a question I have the answer to, so I would love to hear it, but in the field of blockchain, what would be the ethical implications? What would be the areas that you would want to be thinking through, where there might be considerations that you'd want to be mindful of? I would be very curious to know that.
Yeah, me too. So let's see how our next speaker is going to put an answer to that questions. And yeah, that's come for the end of our episode 2 BizTalk on the theme of ESGs. Thank you for coming, Christie. It's really great to have you. I know you have a busy schedules, but thanks for coming. I believe that all of our students and audience will find today's episode very inspiring, and hoping you can take some advice from that as well. So yeah, that's me again.